to the sorts of projects and investments and spaces that I see in my work through ACR in Southeast Asia and in South Asia, where you've got many more people per square kilometre, you've got the sorts of shocks to the systems that we see here, and you've got the sorts of land ownership and land tenure issues that have been discussed here, so small-scale farms. And I think reflecting on these issues around the scale of investments, the scale of agriculture, the diversity of agricultural systems here, and the importance of having context-specific local knowledge, for me are these sort of pillars of what the African way looks like. And it's thinking through that local context. I think the other thing I wanted to reflect on, the second point, and again, this is my construction, right, but it's really around understanding this sort of post-colonial water systems and governance. And so what I mean by that, and Anton made the point very well, and we've heard it through the week, is that lots of focus is on irrigation schemes and how they've succeeded and failed over time and the reasons around that. But we know that there's an enormous untapped resource in terms of groundwater, certainly in Sub-Saharan Africa. Very, very little of that groundwater is used, and relative to the other countries that I work in, where groundwater resources are either exploited or fully exploited, overexploited, there's an enormous potential here. And being able to tap into groundwater potentially gives you that continuity of supply over time. The other thing that Anton spoke about is, the amount of food that's produced from non-irrigated schemes, so rain-fed schemes. Of course, there might be irrigation supply related to that, but thinking through the governance systems that can help to drive a continuity and an expansion of agriculture for what you would imagine would be the African way. Lots of smallholder farmers, a smaller number of large-scale farmers, I think, is something is something worth thinking about in more detail. And it's that systems-based approach that we need to pay more attention to. So the third point I wanted to make is around this idea that if you can't meet the needs of the most vulnerable people in your community, right, you're on the wrong mission, you're on the wrong track, right? A judge of the health and wealth of any society is about how we treat and how the needs of the most vulnerable are met. And I think there's a lot to be said for the way that communities operate, and a lot to be said for the sorts of approaches that we take when we think about structuring these projects. And what we heard from Kevin Peterson, not the cricketer, but the groundwater scientist yesterday, was around the potential to tap into groundwater systems, many of which exist in some of these borderlands areas where you've got displaced populations and areas that are often more exposed to diseases, to disasters such as flooding, etc. So that for me, there are enormous opportunities, and I think one of the ways to approach that is to start thinking through, who are the most vulnerable in these communities, and what are the opportunities to deal with them, because that's the judge of any society. And then the last point I wanted to make is around this idea about bundling innovations and partnerships. And Inga from IMI made the point really strongly, and it was echoed through several other presentations, and it's exactly the way that ACR has been operating through our projects here. And it's not sufficient to have one line of engagement. When you think about the householders that we've heard about, householders don't think about siloed government agencies, bringing this thing and that thing and those engagements. So when we think about bundling of innovations and partnerships, perhaps it's worth thinking about that from the context of the end user, from the householder, the recipient of the sorts of work that we're doing, and how does that help shape our work. And so finally, I just wanted to reflect on some more concrete things. So we've made a commitment to go forward with the support of the Department of Foreign Affairs in Australia with an investment in circular food systems, which is going to be led by Professor Piddock from ANU, but with a range of partners. So that's building on the TISA project, which has been running for a decade or so, and we're really excited about that prospect of localizing and neutralizing, I guess, from a carbon footprint perspective, potential economies and opportunities for communities. And I think that idea of 1,000 flowers blooming in an environment of trust is exactly the modality that makes sense for us to be investing in. So I'm I'm very excited about that investment and looking forward to sitting down with the team tomorrow and working in more detail on the planning. And then the last thing to say, just to follow on from my comments on Monday morning, is that we're also looking very hard at the possibility of what we're calling a transformational research initiative. So in ACR speak, that's a fewer, larger, longer type of investment. And drought and dry lands in Eastern and Southern Africa is the African candidate for that investment. And the sorts of things we might invest in that space speak very strongly to exactly the priorities that were covered over the last few days. So, look, that's it from me. I'm so excited to have been here. It's been a long time coming, right? For me, coming back to Africa in a useful capacity rather than as a tourist. And I wish you all the best for the rest of the conference, and looking forward to the field trip. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's nice to hear that there is life after TISA. So transformational, research. I'm quite for that. I know that there's some convergence as far as development partners are concerned, that we've had a lot of pilots in Africa. I don't know about the other developing world. That it's time we saw implementation to scale. And I think a longer term investment would allow for that sort of thing to happen. And probably some flexibility in terms of, more or less like action research, so that as you implement, you're always going to find that there will be new things coming up that you probably didn't have in the original plan if you're going to implement to scale. Just one other comment that I picked up in your 5 sort of areas or reflections, the African way, the issue of context being so important. And I think the fact that we can't pinpoint the African way is probably an indictment on the African practitioners, the scientists, that we're probably not documenting what this African way is so that we can change that narrative. I think we need to tell the story from our own perspective and capturing the context, which are so rich in Africa, but which also make it very difficult to do some research in a way that's sort of linear, like we're taught in school, the scientific way. You'll find that there's a lot of so-called non-scientific issues you have to grapple with. And I think, was it yesterday when I made a comment with not some people, my wife actually took me to task as gender washing, when I said my mother would not feel that she was disempowered. She said, exactly. That's the kind of talk we don't want to hear. We don't want to be seen as people that are powerful but in the background. We want to be up front there with you and, making the decisions and, in meetings and, talking to power. So, yeah, my apologies. In fact, I'm apologizing to my wife. She says, my daughter said, you must go and tell them that I'm sorry. I made this statement, but so I have. So that's out of the way. Okay. All right. So we have a place maybe for a couple of questions, maybe 5 minutes to what is a very important session, but because of time, we're having to squeeze it, and it's unfortunate because investment is really what it's all about. Any comments, quick ones, questions? There's a hand at the back there. There's one up front here. Any other? So it looks like we have those 2. Yes, please go ahead, ma'am.
Mine is a very short. It's working. Okay, mine is a very short comment directed to Siwi. We are talking about partnerships, and I hope it will start from this room. I know that at the end of August, there will be the World Water Week, and many participants would want to come from this room. But I remember there's a registration fee that sometimes is very high. Can you promise that you can waive off that one so that our declaration can be read in Stockholm? Thank you.
Thank you. We can. Yeah, we had one. Oh, okay. I didn't see that one. Please go ahead.
Thank you so much. I'm Reston Aiga from Makerere University in Uganda. I want to make a clear link in the morning presentation about the policy where we agreed that actually while we need conducive policies, but we must also translate them into practice. And translating them into practice require substantial funding. Now, I want to say the African way without generalizing, refer to Makerere, to Uganda. Funding for agriculture sector continue to be the lowest compared to other sectors such as peace and security. But also, agriculture is increasingly becoming not economically viable, especially for the young ones. So how do we overcome this paradox? Low investment, not being economically viable, but then we are talking about transitioning to smart agriculture. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would like also to give recommendation to both for ACR and the CIWI for the International Commission on Irrigation and Drainage. During the last 6 years, we have agreed activities for supporting the capacity building for younger professionals. And after 6 years, we have reached to more than 7,500 members from all Africa. We are keeping a daily contact with them to share information, knowledge, and we are supporting them in all directions. I see, I think today we are agree that the investment in capacity building and development is a must be in the top. So let us keep all our hands together to support our African young professional. At the same time, I see also it is a good time to consider the capacity building for smallholder farmers, and even we can step by step also consider the other players or partner in smart in climate smart agriculture. This is my comment, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes, go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Umar Al Farouk, a young water professional, and I'm very glad to be invited by ICID and to be also part of this program of VIA training in the coming days. So this shows, like, all the way coming from Central Africa, a francophone regional part of Africa, to learn from this part of Eastern and South Africa and what they have been doing so far. I'm more interested in public-private partnership and investment in agricultural sector. So my question goes to the first presenter. If I may right from CUE, like you have proven that most of our agricultural system in Africa are unfed. And what make the agriculture area not attractive? Because we are always speaking about, like, how agriculture is profitable, how people can make money from agriculture. We have seen cases in United States, like the most richest people are from the agricultural area. So what is missing from the research to business, also from the research to practice? Why private sector doesn't have incentives to come to agricultural area? What is missing there? Are they not much convinced by the researchers, or the research that you are doing are not well oriented in terms of return of investment, in terms of business incentive? So, because even you are seeing in the transport sector, in the energy sector, private sector coming, like, into a massive investment. So no need even to convince them more or to take a long way to show them the profitable, in terms of investment in this area. So what is missing there, and how can we make private sector come more into massive investment in agricultural sector, because we know that smallholder farmers can no longer support or never can say be able to afford the infrastructure equipment and also to make investment in this area. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all those questions from the floor. I don't know if there's anything online. Are we checking? Maybe while you do that, let's give an opportunity to presenters to respond. Who wants to start, gentlemen?
Great, thank you very much. Yes, thank you, ma'am, for reminding me about the World Water Week in Stockholm. I should have probably ended with an invitation to that. But you're quite right to say it's very expensive to attend. I mean, not only the registration fee, but travel and being there. Seaweed does every year put out a few scholarships aimed at young people, aimed at young professionals and so forth, but there are not many of those. So I do recognize that as a challenge. And unfortunately, I can't myself waive registration fees. We are dependent on those to function. But the good news is that we are holding the event as a hybrid event, and participating in the virtual part of the World Water Week is free. So that is free for participants to engage in, so you can do that much as what's being done over here. So I hope that does help somewhat. Then the really, really good question over here, you asked about why is the sector unattractive? I mean, I'd almost turn it on its head and say, well, what makes the sector attractive? Why would we want to expect young people to go into this sector where we know about some of the barriers? We've been speaking about them for the last few days. There's issues around land tenure. So as a start, you're expecting someone to invest in a business, but the very foundation of their business, they're not sure if it's secure in terms of land tenure. That's one I can think of. High input costs that have been rising a lot related to market prices that you can achieve for products that don't go up to match that. Another big barrier, so difficult to do business. But I think we're familiar with those. I would actually ask, there's probably something of a psychological barrier with agriculture that all of us face. It's the one industry I know of where we expect the people who go into agriculture to be the very people who grew up in an agricultural background. So we always talk about, well, why are young people who grew up on the farms not staying on the farms? Instead of thinking, why aren't we seeing people who grew up in the city looking at agriculture as like, yeah, I can't wait to get out there and try my luck and see if I can make it as an entrepreneur. So there's that psychological difference. So until we change that mindset, I don't think we're going to see agriculture becoming attractive as a career option as it ought to be. Thank you.
Thanks. Look, I just wanted to maybe follow on from that a little bit. So we heard from several speakers around, the risky proposition that agriculture is in terms of land tenure, in terms of continuity of water supply, and issues around the size and the role of women. And so I've got a couple of points which hopefully will come together. And then through the conference we've heard about some really alarming figures, right? So 30 to 50% of food that leaves the farm gate is lost on the way to market. So I mean, it's horrifying, right? And we heard some really good examples about how some recovery processes have been put in place to try and bring some of that food back into the system and not just for animals. And so if I was a farmer, why would I want to grow more if half of what I grow is rotting and I'm not getting a return on it? My labour would be better spent doing something else. And so you then would ask, well, no wonder schemes are potentially falling into disrepair. And so, if you ask these questions about transport and energy, potentially, if you do get that continuity of tenure of water, that security at scheme or whatever size that the agriculture takes place, I think then there is the opportunity to build that flow-on agribusiness. So you're not losing 30 to 50% of your harvest between farm gate and market. And so there is that return, and you could absolutely see the incentives that might be there for businesses to try and capitalise on, you know, that waste product and essentially put in play better cold storage, better supply chains, better transport, better packaging, etc., with what appears to be a product that is, you know, going to livestock at the moment. So I think there are good opportunities there, but it comes from this core of having a sustainable and reliable agriculture base, and that revolves around tenure, it revolves around security of water, and good inputs. Thanks.
Okay, there were a couple of other questions possibly that you may want to, I guess maybe these have been addressed. Agriculture, non-viable for youth, I think you probably addressed that adequately. And also capacity building for young professionals. Do you want to say anything more, or is that reasonably well covered?
So I mean, capacity building is critical. I spoke about it a little bit in my remarks just before. But it's important to have, you know, the right capacity, the right skills. And I think the way, for example, that, you know, the VIA has brought their training to Africa, initially through an online series and now through a more targeted training for some I don't know if I can call you all young professionals, but young to mid-level professionals, I think is spot on. It's really focused, and it's focused on giving these professionals the tools to then, and the expertise to take home and build out. So that continuity of training, the ability to not just train and forget, right, but to follow, I think is quite important. And you know, I'm keen to see what opportunities there might be for ACR to follow that.
Thank you. And also, I've been involved personally in a lot of capacity building, you know, efforts from various subsectors of agriculture. And one thing is, I think the development sort of world, those that support and provide resources, there was a time there was a lot of capacity building, individuals, training and all that. And you got to a point where you said, I think we've done enough. Unfortunately, there's a lot of the people that were trained then, if you go back 10, 20 years, most of them have since retired, and there's really been no pipeline of you know, new people coming in. So you can't say I did capacity building, especially for human capacity side, and you know, 20 years ago we should be okay. No, you can't, because things are changing so fast. So you need to be continuously doing this. But I also want to come back to the business case for capacity development, like everything else. I think if you tie it to something that's specific, where people are making money, whether we're talking smallholder farmers or you know, young professionals, there must be a business case. Without that business case, yes, you can get a short-term investment, and when that investment, you know, is over, project-based, then things stop. But you need that business case to give you the sustainability. Otherwise, thank you very much, gentlemen, for giving us you know, these pointers to reflect on. So that was the investment case, whether for rain-fed agriculture. Interesting, you know, paradox there, that 95% sort of investment going into irrigation, but 5% into rain-fed agriculture, whereas we're getting 95% of our food from there. But again, I think the question is, what's the business case? So that analysis is critical. So if we go to government and told them that, would you see less money going into irrigation? I mean, that would be unfortunate, but there has to be some equity and, you know, some sense coming into these, you know, investment decisions. Thank you so much. So we're going to excuse the two gentlemen, and then we move on to the closing session. And yes, let's give them a big hand. Thank you so much. So we're moving on to the closing session. This is, it says official closing, and we need to see up here to join the team here, Professor Henning Yonland. You here? Thank you. Nompumelelo Oboko. She's coming down. Thank you. Dr. Canisius Kanangere of the African Agricultural Technology Foundation. I'm told he's not here, but is Vito here? No? Okay. He's here? I'm not sure Vito is here. Oh, you're representing IT. Thank you, sir. Okay. I didn't get your name.
My name is Francis Nangayo.
Francis Nangayo. Okay, thank you. So you're representing ATF. Thank you. Who else do we have here? Professor Jamie Pittock is here. Thank you. And yes, Excellency Ms. Tegan Brink, the Australian High Commissioner to South Africa. Thank you. And in place of the Director General representing the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development, with Ms. Chipeta, who is the Chief Director of Natural Resources and Disaster Management. Welcome, Madam. And then, of course, my CEO, Dr. Chilidzi Mantsiwandila, is here. So we've got everybody that needs to be sitting up here to give us the closing remarks. We're going to start with the partner remarks, from starting off with Professor Henning Yonland. I hope I'm pronouncing it right. Please go ahead and give us your partner remarks or closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. So I do that on behalf of the International Water Resources Association, of which I am Vice President. So I would first like to thank FANRAPAN for putting on this brilliant and very, very important dialogue. It has been a pleasure working with FANRAPAN and the team in this process. You have done a really great job. Thank you. I would also like, I would also like to thank FANRAPAN for giving IWA the opportunity to participate in and contribute to the critical political dialogue. I think my fellow board member, Rabi Mokhtar, gave a very, very good presentation the other day in the Circular Food System session. And one of our mentees, Aristarix, gave a very good presentation on participatory management. For those who are not familiar with the IWR, it is a global membership-based organization with a focus on integrated water resources management in the context of the policy dialogue, the policy science interface, and governance. As a board member of the IWA since 2013, serving first as chair of the scientific committee and now as vice president, I work to increase IWA's engagement in agricultural water management as a driver of rural economic development, food security, and poverty eradication. As a part of that process, the IWR were part of organizing the rural development theme at the World Water Forum in Dakar, Senegal last year. The TISA project has reported findings from the project at the last 2 World Water Congresses due to the funding from Asia. Thank you, Neil. IRA is engaged with many aspects of water management in collaboration with leading global organizations. It is a member of the Board of Governors of the World Water Council and the Asian Water Council, and a member of the OECD's Water Governance Initiative. IRA leads important themes and provides thought leadership at events such as the World Water Forum, Stockholm International Water Week, and the recent Groundwater Summit, UN Groundwater Summit, and next week at the UN Water Conference in New York. IRA is assisting UNESCO in producing its annual issues of the Global Water Security Series and organize free online conferences every year in collaboration with FAO and UNESCO. We also run masterclasses, webinars, and publish the journal Water International. Our flagship event, the biannual Water Resources World Water Council, The next one will be held in Beijing in September, and we will like all of you to be part of it. And we are currently negotiating with partners here in South Africa to hold the 2025 World Water Congress right here in this beautiful country. The host city of each Congress has to sponsor 10 youth envoys to attend the Congress, and a senior IRA member mentor them before, during, and after the Congress. I had the pleasure of mentoring a young Zimbabwean woman to attend the Congress, the last Congress, and have continued to mentor her since. She has just received offers of fully funded PhD scholarships from Stanford and Oregon State University, and I'm likely to get a third one from Oxford. So the young lady has a tough choice to make soon. Over the last 3 days, we had a diverse debate about climate change agriculture, and we're giving many examples of initiatives and ideas as to how to achieve this. To transition to climate resilient farming is a challenging, as farming is highly complex, and isolated intervention will not achieve the outcomes. The debate has also highlighted that the process raises different challenges for large-scale sophisticated agriculture, such as the wine industry in South Africa, and for small-scale irrigators across Sub-Saharan Africa. Considering that about 80% of the rural population depends at least in part on smallholder production for food security and income, I will argue that the transition to climate-resilient farming must pay close attention to the small farm sector. To be resilient, smallholders' production must be integrated into the local market economy, so the local produce is used to stimulate local rural economic growth and create opportunities for producers to value add and generate local jobs and business opportunities. This cannot be achieved only by using imported input to increase yield. Locally available and cost-effective approaches are needed, such as intercropping, integration of nutritious traditional crops, crop livestock integration, regional grain storage facilities, financial and nutritional literacy training, and value-adding processes. These approaches require strong community engagement, farmer agency, and accountability in governance structures, especially supporting the role of women, extension services, and market integration, enabling farmers to make their crop selection in response to market signals and changing climatic conditions. The sessions on circular food systems have made a significant contribution to this debate. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof, for those closing remarks, especially the opportunities that are available for mentorship. We were talking earlier on about, capacity development, so that's something to think about. We will proceed and hear from Dr. Nompumelelo Obogo, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the South African Council for Natural Scientific Professions. Please, if you can give your closing remarks, Madam.
Thank you very much, Chair. I am Matshidiso Matabane. I'm the Acting Science Communications Manager at the South African Council for Natural Scientific Professions, or SACNASP. I'll be speaking on behalf of our CEO, Dr. Nompumelelo Obogo. SACNASP being one of the key partners to this very important and relevant dialogue, we would really like to take this opportunity to thank FANAPAN, more especially the CEO, Dr. Chilidzi, as well as his team for the vision to convene this important dialogue on transitioning to a climate-resilient farming system in Africa. So just briefly about SACNASP, it is a statutory body that registers and regulates the natural scientists in South Africa. And we currently have over 16,000 natural scientists who are registered with the council, and we cover 26 fields of practice, and the biggest field amongst all of them is agriculture. I just also want to highlight that one of our key objectives as a council is to proactively advise government as well as different stakeholders on policy and decision-making matters, hence our participation at this important dialogue. As we come to the close of this policy dialogue, it is important that we have a moment to reflect on the debates and the deliberations as well as the discussions that took place over the past couple of days. And we would like to again remind all of us, or perhaps echo the CEO's opening remarks on 3 key objectives that were covered in the dialogue: to share empirical evidence on the importance of climate-smart agriculture in transitioning to climate-resilient farming communities in Sub-Saharan Africa, to develop recommendations on how to build a climate-smart and resilient farming systems in Sub-Saharan Africa at scale, and lastly, to provide networking and partnerships as well as actions. So you will all agree with me that all of these aspects or all of these objectives were indeed advanced and achieved over the course of the dialogue. So the empirical evidence that was presented by distinguished guests as well as the experts over the days made it clear that climate change does pose a significant threat to agriculture, food security, as well as rural livelihoods in Africa, and we are already feeling the adverse effects of climate change. So it is important that we transition to a climate-resilient farming system, and it is also it is urgent to address that, and we also need to take steps towards ensuring sustainable agriculture and food security. And through this specific dialogue, we have identified various challenges as well as opportunities that need to be addressed in transitioning. And these include the need for policy and institutional reforms, innovative financing mechanisms. We spoke about capacity building. We spoke about technology transfer. We also highlighted the need for stakeholder engagement. And the discussions we have had over the past couple of days emphasize the need for us to be bold and intentional, and for urgent actions to be taken to mitigate the impact of climate change on agriculture, and the need to promote sustainable development. We've also heard from various speakers about the importance of addressing capacity gaps that exist and supporting our smallholder farmers and ensuring that they have access to the necessary resources, to inputs and technologies to adapt to climate change. And I heard one of the speakers this morning highlighting the various technologies such as weather forecasting, early warning systems, as well as precision agricultural tools, which are aimed at assisting our farmers to adapt and to also optimize the production. We would like to again emphasize the transitioning to a climate-resilient farming system in Sub-Saharan Africa requires a multi-stakeholder approach, a fit-for-purpose approach where government departments, farmers, the private sector, civil society, as well as developmental partners work together to ensure that the successful implementation of climate-resilient farming practices. And in closing, we would like to not only urge, but to also challenge all of us in this room as stakeholders to take a bold action and to be active citizens in addressing the effects and the impacts of climate change towards transitioning. And let us work together towards a sustainable and resilient future for agriculture, food security, and rural development. And lastly, we would like to thank all the distinguished speakers, all the panelists, as well as all the moderators for the contributions to this important and relevant dialogue. And again, we would like to thank FANAPAN for their hard work into putting together this important event. And we really hope that these discussions that we have had over the days will continue to inform our work going forward, and we will continue to collaborate, and most importantly, take advantage of the Minister's invitation for further engagements and deliberations from the AU and from the AU to present the recommendations from this dialogue to the meeting of African Ministers of Agriculture at the AU. Let us take charge of our future and forge towards advancing the urgent call and critical mission. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam, for representing SACNASP. We move on, and we're now going to hear from the African Agricultural Technology Foundation, AATF, and Dr. Francis Nangayo is going to give us the partner remarks.
Thank you, Chair. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, as they normally say, all protocols observed. On behalf of the Executive Director of AATF and on behalf of the AATF delegation to this event, I would like to express our gratitude to FANAPAN for inviting our participation to this very, very engaging event. This much, I want just to simply say we very, very much appreciate. You will notice that this is the first time AATF was participating, or let me say actively participating in the FANAPAN organized dialogue events. So AATF may not be very well known, so if I may, let me just use 1 minute to say what AATF is, because I realize sometimes when I say I'm from AATF, people can say ATTF or what, but it is AATF. And AATF was established 20 years ago as a platform for technology transfer. Technology transfer of agricultural technologies, those technologies that can offer solutions to constraints affecting farmers in Africa. And in this regard, I would perhaps gladly say that when my colleague was given an opportunity to showcase some of this, I think he did not disappoint. He passionately talked about breakthrough technologies that in many cases are being associated to witchcraft. But this is not witchcraft. This is science and technology transforming Africa. So AATF is proud to be associated with such, and it's not just AATF alone. We work with partners in this regard. And in the course of the 20 years, we have realized that even with those breakthrough technologies likened to witchcraft, for you to deliver these technologies to the required farmers, there is a need for enabling environment of policies, regulations, institutions, and markets that necessarily need to align so that the technologies can be sustainably transferred to the end users. And in this regard, we want to thank FANAPAN for the active participation in the area of policy, which speaks to that essential subject of enabling environment. And And as I close, I want to say that AATF will be seeking to sustain our partnership with FANAPAN, and we will be seeking particularly to concretize our relationships through MOUs and joint programs. In fact, I want to say that maybe the next signing ceremony, the presiding minister should see the CEO of FANAPAN and the CEO of AATF sign on the dotted line. I thank you very much one more time for listening to me.
Thank you very much, AATF. And yeah, I'm not sure whether your technologies, the difference between your technologies and witchcraft, I guess is the documentation of the IP. So maybe you may want to see how you can document the other witchcraft stuff. And so it's widely available as much as your technologies are. So we'll proceed and ask Prof. Jamie Pittock from the Australian National University, who has also been leading the TISA project with the African partners it says here, to bring it all together, the next steps. So that's hopefully an easy task, but...
Professor Sibanda, thank you. It is indeed a most daunting task to try and summarise what has been 3 fantastic days of the most diverse and expert contributions in what was to have been 15 minutes, but now should be something shorter. So we have gathered here on the beautiful grounds at Tooks University. I'm not sure that they have the water-saving technology in place yet, going by this photo taken this morning. But perhaps after our conference, they will have access to that. What we've heard here is the obvious, that climate-smart agriculture is essential and is a major mission that we have collectively if we are to feed a population of 10 billion people on this earth with a changing climate, and to do it sustainably and equitably. The fact that Minister Dadiza was here, I think, indicates the societal importance placed on this issue in Africa. Her expert and eloquent words, I think, really highlight how important the work that we are doing is for our peoples. We've had the most amazing participation from organisations, from people representing government, research and industry. And it was particularly pleasing, I think, to see how this event has brought together not only the physical science researchers in agriculture, but also those from the social sciences, with organisations like the Human Sciences Research Council so actively involved in bringing that human dimension to these critical problems. So much is happening, and there's so much potential. Next slide, please. So climate-smart agriculture. After 3 days, what really is it? I came away thinking that it is awfully complicated, that in the agricultural sector our objectives have grown from simply producing food to try to cover a diversity of society's needs, from greater gender and youth equity through to managing scarce water supplies, through to responding to climate change. And there's been a great long list of crucial elements that have been raised where we collectively can do a better job in agriculture. I came away thinking that from these 3 days, adaptation to climate variability and change in agriculture really involves 2 key elements. One is getting more social and economic benefit from limited natural resource use in a variable climate. And the second is building greater equity, human capacity and resilience to the more frequent shocks that we're seeing, even in this week with Cyclone Freddy, unfortunately making a mess in Mozambique and Malawi. Next slide, please. But in our discussions, I think the climate change mitigation element may have been underrepresented. So there have been passing mentions in terms of the potential for better soil management, land care programs, thinking through what the energy, water and agriculture nexus looks like. We can't, for example, use groundwater better in agriculture if we don't have reliable energy supplies and are subject to constant load shedding. Circular food systems is another potential way to contribute to responding to climate change. So agriculture can contribute more in reducing emissions and sequestering carbon, and I think it's important for the agricultural sector to think about that, as was raised by speakers today, in terms of benefiting from the extra finance streams that might emerge from that, as well as an enhanced social licence to operate. I'd like to, in this summary, be a little provocative with three observations. The first is I'm continually puzzled coming to Africa with government's obsessions with new hectares of irrigation command areas and more hectare targets. I think that the constant comparison with Asia is misleading. Africa is not Asia. Asia has more water. It's had glaciers rumbling across it for the past 2.2 million years and very rich soils. Africa is a different place, and we shouldn't be comparing apples and oranges. I would argue that some of the empirical case studies presented in this forum have shown that we can get far more food, social and economic benefit from farming the existing agricultural areas better than necessarily investing in very expensive expansions of irrigation infrastructure, for example. So we saw the example of Grain South Africa, who had increased yields by increasing the capacity of smallholder farmers, increased yields by 3 to 4-fold. We've heard of the examples from the Virtual Irrigation Academy and the Transforming Irrigation in Southern Africa projects, where farmers learning from simple-to-use soil monitoring tools have increased crop yields, in many cases 2 or 3-fold. And so will investing in people yield more for agriculture than focusing purely on expanding hectares and infrastructure? And I think the important question was raised, is demand-driven development likely to be more effective? Things like the farmer-led irrigation, things like helping communities to develop small value-adding businesses, will that be more effective in getting to a more climate-resilient system than some of this very expensive public infrastructure? The second observation, rightly, a great many presenters have talked about the needs to support the disadvantaged sectors of society to benefit more, to achieve more equitable livelihoods. And I was really pleased that we focus so much on women and youth in that discussion. But there has been a lot of rhetoric. We did hear some particularly useful, I thought, empirical analyses. I really welcome Karen Parry's, for example, analysis of how youth in rural communities might be supported to develop better livelihoods. And there were some good presentations on understanding the gender disadvantage. But perhaps it's time now that we stop talking about that less and actually doing it in terms of implementing the measures that we know that work in terms of improving equity. Things like training and mentoring, things like improving land tenure and improving access of women and youth to financing mechanisms. And then lastly, I thought it was notable the extent to which monitoring, learning, benchmarking and mentoring were highlighted as ways in which we can help the agricultural sector become more climate resilient. And there were some outstanding examples presented. So, for example, the Virtual Irrigation Academy has presented the Chameleon and Full Stop tools that really catalyse learning and have put so many farmers on a pathway to a more sustainable agricultural system. At the more resource-rich end of the agricultural spectrum, our South African wine and grains friends presented some fantastic industry tools, monitoring systems, mentoring systems that have clearly had a major impact in improving equity and yields and profitability. And so I came away asking, how can these kinds of programs be systematically extended to other industries and geographies? And I'm sure that any of the government officials here who are impressed by the Chameleon and Full Stop, Professor Sturzaker up there would welcome your tools order to assist your governments take that further. Next slide, please. And so a final thought with this picture that I took of one of the few and good examples I saw of integrated crop and livestock production in my years of wandering around irrigation schemes in southern Africa. This scheme at Toshongokwe is perhaps the only one I've seen where there was actually livestock pens in the irrigation field to integrate, to feed the livestock the crop residues and return the manure to the fields to get that maximum advantage. And so on that, with that example of irrigation, of integration I should say, my final thought really is that we've had a fabulous cavalcade of organisations with excellent programs, and each of us have presented incremental examples of reforms and ideas for better climate-smart agriculture. But is this really going to lead to the transformational change that our countries and societies need urgently? So how best can we integrate the enthusiasm and knowledge here? We haven't had a lot of time for synthesis discussions in this meeting. We perhaps need them to build on things like the Common Africa Agricultural Development Programme commitments that the governments have made. And so perhaps, Shilidzi, dare I say, is this a job for FANRAPAN? To do this integration, to find the 10 key things that are going to drive more climate-smart agriculture out of this dialogue and perhaps form the basis of our next discussion. Thank you. Oh, and my final thanks, FANRAPAN, for being the most marvellous facilitators of this dialogue, the many donor and partner organisations here, and the splendid participants. Have been around 120 here in person, and I've noted around 145 actively participating online. So fantastic engagement. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Prof, for doing the impossible, summarizing 3 days' worth of discussions in a few minutes. I think that can only be done by an accomplished professor. Yeah. Thank you. So this brings us to the last parts of our closing session with the official closing. And we're going to hear from Her Excellency Tegan Brink, the Australian High Commissioner for South Africa. As you have heard, this partnership and this meeting was largely, as a result of the investment that Australia made through the TISA program, which has brought so many other partners to bring. So there has been a multiplier effect. And also the news that there is going to be a successor to TISA. We're quite excited about that. So without further ado, of course, this is part of the session where I will not paraphrase or anything. It's closing, so if it's closed, it's closed. So, yes, Your Excellency, please, if you can come and give us the closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Sibanda, and good afternoon, everybody. It's a little daunting, actually, being a diplomat following all of these extraordinary agricultural scientists who know so much stuff. But I very much enjoyed what I heard this afternoon. Look, it's my great pleasure to be here at the University of Pretoria's Future Africa campus. This is a really impressive building, and I loved walking in here and feeling what this campus feels like. It's the first time I've done that, and in fact, this is my first official engagement as Australia's High Commissioner to South Africa. Just yesterday, I had the great... Thank you. I had the great honour yesterday of presenting my credentials to President Cyril Ramaphosa, so it's a special moment, and that is why I wasn't able to be here at the beginning. But I understand from Jamie's summary just given now that you really have discussed a whole range of critical issues relating to food security, nutrition, water, and agriculture, and you've done it in a very concrete way. And I guess at the macro level, and often this is what diplomats work on, is these issues are only becoming more important given the protracted crises we have in Africa and elsewhere in the world. Population growth, you talked about 10 billion people. We also, of course, have accelerating climate impacts, the impacts that are here now. And I think Anton, where is Anton sitting? It's not the future, but it's happening now. And of course, this has all been made worse by the long tail of COVID-19 economic disruptions and, of course, Russia's invasion of Ukraine, a global food producer. So I'm so pleased to see so many Australians here and people related to Australia. And in particular, I would like to acknowledge Dr. Mutsa Bandela, who I'm not sure if you know, is an alumni of an Australian university. He's got a PhD from the University of New England, and we're so proud to have you as part of the Australian Alumni Network, and of course of the really significant work you're doing as CEO of FANRAPAN. So look, I've only just arrived here though, so I hope this is the beginning of some work that we can do together. And I'd like to acknowledge your team as well. Pulling off a conference like this is something diplomats do know about when our ministers travel around the world, is organising things like this, the logistics, the program, and getting the diversity and the experts to make a successful conference, which you clearly have done. So maybe just on a sort of a few substantive points. I mean, you are the experts, you know the statistics, but when I was doing some reading to prepare for today, the one that really shocked me the most is that there are 200 million more people facing acute food insecurity now than before COVID-19, and that there are about 49 million people on the brink of famine. In Afghanistan, Ethiopia, Somalia, South Sudan, Yemen, these are countries that are of the highest concern, and this relates, or it includes, of course, due to the longest drought period in the Horn of Africa in 40 years. Now, rising food insecurity, of course, highlights sort of in a systemic way the vulnerability of agriculture to interacting shocks, particularly those relating to climate change. Agriculture and fisheries production are highly vulnerable to climate change and climate extremes, and this is happening now. It's happening in my country, it's happening in your countries, and this is really unacceptable. It's really unacceptable and requires concerted action by governments, international organisations, academics, civil society and farmers themselves to address this. And scientists are so important to finding some of these solutions. And just on the way to work today, and this is just a bit of an aside, I heard a sort of a story that to me sounded quite amazing about how Castle Lager have found a way to use the waste from the production of beer into making bread. Now, I don't know the details, but it did, when you were talking about circular food production and food systems and dealing with this along the supply chain, it did sound like a little innovation that could have quite a significant impact. Now, for Australia's part, how are we responding to some of these issues? We are committed to continuing high levels of humanitarian assistance, including committing more than $232 million to the World Food Programme since 2021-22. We're also providing financial and technical assistance to countries in our region to build food system resilience. So this isn't about one-off assistance, but about sustainability and productivity in agriculture and the food system for long-term food security. Australia is also supporting social protection systems. These are very important. They're important at the national level, and they're important to develop around the world for people affected by the food crisis. Working closely as well with the multilateral development banks and the IMF to provide finance that is well targeted to help countries and people address the impact of higher food and fertiliser prices, which we've seen in the last few years. Now, I wouldn't be an Australian official if I didn't also mention trade and the importance of open, functioning markets. And I noticed in the mind map, Neil's mind map, where is Neil? Neil's mind map, that at the tip of Africa, in South Africa, was tariffs. So, we continue in the WTO, bilaterally, regionally, to advocate for open, transparent and predictable agricultural trade and to avoid export restrictions on food and fertilisers, which can have sort of cascading negative effects on the availability of food, on the price of food, and can actually lead to a decline in food available in world markets. As a major agricultural exporter, we are committed to remain a reliable supplier of food products to the world. Closer to home, though, here in Africa, through the Australian Centre for International Agricultural Research, we are promoting collaboration and working to create new opportunities, particularly for smallholder farmers. We've been doing this work for over 30 years, and we're very, very proud of the contribution that Australians and Australian projects have made here. It was great to hear, Neil, about ACR's 10-year strategy, to see the prominence of gender equality, and I loved your anecdote about your conversation, I think, with your wife on gender equality and women's empowerment issues. I mean, this is a cross-cutting issue in development, and it's really, really good to address it head on. Now, I know over the past few days you've discussed the TISA project led by our inimitable Australian professor, Jamie Pittock, and I think this is a really terrific example of collaboration between scientists and experts in different fields, from academia and government, to achieve real change for over 15,000 farmers and the many more communities that those farmers support. And we heard from Anton about the importance of smallholder farmers to this conversation. So I might conclude now and just to say that issues of food insecurity and the impacts of climate change on agriculture are some of the most important issues that policymakers are dealing with in the world today. You all know that better than most, and I really want to thank you for all of the work that you're doing to address these issues. I'm committed in my role as the High Commissioner here to continue to promote collaboration between our scientists and our experts, so that Australia too can play our role in addressing what is really a global and profoundly human issue. So I thank you. Thank you, Professor.
Thank you, High Commissioner, we need all the friends to tackle these challenges. We're going to move ahead and ask the representative of the Director General of the Department of Agriculture and Land Reform and Rural Development. We had Minister Didiza officially open this workshop, this dialogue. And of course, it's only fitting that a representative would come and close, the dialogue. Ms. Chipeta, who is the Chief Director of Natural Resources and Disaster Management, if you could please come over and officially close the meeting for us.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Program Director. And ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, good afternoon. I had a nice speech prepared for the closing, but I'll deviate a little bit, particularly that Anton mentioned something that was very important and that I hold close to my heart. He mentioned Mulanje. And not only is Mulanje having a beautiful mountain, but it is a high-value agricultural potential land. Also, it's a matriarchal society. So if we want to make sure that all these things that we have been mentioning, we want to put them in practice, Mulanje is where to start. That's where climate-smart agriculture can be implemented with women there at the front, because they are the decision makers. They are blessed with high agricultural potential land. They have development committees that are headed by women. So we can start there. And if in 5 years' time we cannot have a woman from Mulanje, not here, but with a planter, drive with a planter, first picture, and with a crop produced from there. We know we are mothers, but we are also skilled to drive those planters and to make high decisions. And next time when we have this, let's have a case study from Mulanje, where the ground is already ripe for implementation. We have all the tools. Everything is there. All we need to do is to put in what we have been saying to these meetings into practice. We don't need a lot of funding, and I have experienced it. You know, you just can get all those tea plantation managers and everything to contribute to a planter. Work with the chief and make sure that at least things are made easier for these women to go out there in the field. It is so heartbreaking to see how a woman will wake up at 4 o'clock with a hand hoe, when the African Union has said, let us retire the hand hoe to the museum. And we are not retiring them. We still want to fund those things. So let us try and make sure that we put money to what we are saying, and we are able to identify those places where, or like Professor was saying, integrating enthusiasm with knowledge. That's where we can start. And that's where we can come and show the wonderful work that those women who are the drivers of development, who are the mothers there, who are decision makers there, can make a difference and help us drive what we are doing and what we are advocating. Then let me go into what the minister has said, that perhaps it is important that in the next STC, we have an item on climate-smart agriculture, but with practical recommendations that will come out from there. And I like it when the representative from AU was talking about the last slide that Dr. Kakati made, that perhaps we need to go and make sure that we present those recommendations, including all the regional recommendations that has been made. I believe if we work together as partners, we can make climate-smart agriculture work. The rainwater harvesting that has been mentioned. We have communities that cannot afford to have boreholes and all, but they are blessed with a rainwater. Mulanje, for instance, it is forever green. It is always raining there. That's where we can start with this thing. But the thing is, we are always working in isolation. Most of the time, we come up with, like Climate Smart has a framework that has conservation agriculture, agroecology. But most of the time when we go to this community, we come with an approach as if it's the only approach. We don't look at things holistically and say, If we do climate smart agriculture, this is the pillars that are going to go. But we are confusing our communities because, some of them will not even tell the difference that, if you are talking of conservation, agriculture, agroecology, and you are speaking within the framework of climate smart agriculture. So perhaps we need to come with this unified extension services that are talking to the same thing. We need to converge somewhere, irrespective of who our funders are. Then, I've already highlighted the issue of women involvement in our participation. But, the problem is we are always talking about, or the challenge, about women being the professor, where the women say we want to be at the forefront. And men will put us at the forefront. But just as we are running with a baton, the next cycle, it's a man replacing a woman. So this involvement most of the time, it's not sustainable. We are always, you are getting there and then you get replaced. And then it will take another 4 cycles before another woman comes. So if we ensure that there is this sustainability of making sure that this thread is running across the whole development, then I think we will find our way somewhere in the future. We cannot keep on taking a step back, forward and a step backward. Let me then, gents, to congratulate all the successful 2023 Regional Climate Smart Agriculture Policy Dialogue. The discussion of the past 3 days provided a comprehensive analysis on the impact of climate change on the water and agriculture sector, which gives a few clear messages. The future projection in various parts of Africa indicate reduced rainfall, increased temperature, and high variability for the great part of the continent, which will have profound impacts of agricultural performance and thus the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal. Secondly, there is a need for the use of technological and governance innovation to attain developmental outcomes like food security, poverty reduction, and sustainable development in Africa. Inclusive in these interventions are aspects relating to the holistic approach on capacity building, ensuring funds are secured for these initiatives. Affordability and accessibility of innovative adaptation measures remain critical, and these strategies should be part of the broader sustainable development effort in the continent. Lastly, evidence-based strategies should be utilized to guide policy and decision-making in order to lead climate change adaptation and resilience in the water and agriculture sector. I wish to thank you for taking time from all your equally important activities to come and make contributions to make climate change agriculture work and to make sure that we sustain the momentum of advocating for climate change, climate smart agriculture. Inclusive of women, climate smart agriculture is, if it's to succeed, everything will fit together. With this, I thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Chipeta. We now move on to a vote of thanks from my CEO, Dr. Chilidzi Madzivandila. Obviously, we've seen a lot of activity, but it's there's a lot that happens behind the scenes, so I'll leave it to Dr. Chilidzi to take us through that.
Thank you so much, Simba. My job here is very difficult because already you have been thanked, but I will then repeat some of the thanking when I go through my speaking notes. But before I do that, I'll ask Kanto to play a short video, and then I will tell you why I'm doing that. Kanto, if you can assist with that.
The Food, Agriculture and Natural Resources Policy Analysis Network, or FANAPAN, is an all-inclusive, multi-stakeholder Pan-African network with a mandate to conduct and coordinate agricultural policy research and analysis, to promote and disseminate relevant evidence-based research results to inform policy across Africa, and to act as a platform for dialogue and engagement of stakeholders from the food, agriculture and natural resources sector. Our mission is to build resilient food systems across Africa through the creation, implementation and assessment of food, agriculture and natural resources policies that are both evidence-based and developed in partnership with both state and non-state actors. Our strategy is centered on three mutually supportive thrusts: policy research and analysis, capacity strengthening, and policy advocacy. Through ongoing research in each of these thrusts, we conduct studies addressing national and regional trends and challenges, while also providing a basis for cross-country comparative analyses of the effects of different policies on development outcomes. In conjunction with our partners and network members, we provide policy advisory services to policymakers, drawing upon existing research evidence and knowledge to address specific policy questions and decisions. We achieve this by carrying out mutually agreed collaborative research activities with partners, publishing and disseminating research results, providing technical support to national and regional programs, providing opportunities for training and professional development, organizing policy dialogues, workshops, scientific conferences and seminars, facilitating linkages and partnerships amongst institutions with related policy research and professional development activities. FANAPAN is a multi-tiered network consisting of a regional secretariat and established national nodes in 17 African countries in East, Southern and West Africa. Whilst the nodes attend to national policy issues, it is equally important that the evidence from FANAPAN's research efforts inform regional and continental policy processes. To this end, FANAPAN works with regional economic communities which include the Economic Community of West African States, the East African Community, the Southern African Development Community, and the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, ultimately feeding into the African Union Commission processes. Our network's expansion is driven by collaborating and partnering with like-minded entities, reaching out to government departments responsible for food, agriculture, and natural resources, and by working with parliamentarians, research and pharma organizations, the private sector, civil society organizations, development partners, and the media. We have led and continue to lead several highly successful food, agriculture, and natural resources research, policy advocacy, and capacity strengthening initiatives in Africa. FANAPAN works with and through other like-minded institutions to create appropriate evidence-based policies in the food, agriculture, and natural resources sector. Join us as we build resilient African agriculture and food systems, securing prosperity and health in the region.
For joining us. The reason why I thought it is important to play this video. Few years ago, I attended the funeral. After the funeral in African culture, then we go back to the bereaved household. So after the refreshments there, I was seated next to a very young gentleman. He asked me, by the way, whose funeral was it? The reason why I'm sharing this video is that we are coming to an end. You are now ambassadors of FANAPAN. You don't want to be asked to say which event were you attending and then you fail to explain who FANAPAN is. That's the reason why I asked for this video to be shared, so that you fully appreciate the institution that you are partnering with. And also then to, when you think about your future investments, see the value in which FANAPAN can add, so that we don't implement in silos, but then we implement collaborating with each other. Coming back to the task that I was given, we appreciate the 10-year relationship that we've had with the Australian government through ASEA and Australian universities. We know that it has been a long journey. We really appreciate the new investment that is coming through to assist us to solve African challenges. The one thing that I want to underscore is that we really appreciate your presence here. We know that there are other competing demands. You could have been elsewhere, but you chose to come and contribute your intellectual property, your intellectual experiences here. And for that, we really appreciate. The way in which we operate as FANAPAN, we operate in a model of partnerships. Hence, you can see that our banner here has got 10 partners that came together and said that this is a topical issue which we wish to be part of. And for all those 10 partners, we are saying thank you so much. In terms of some statistics, we are having 120 plus people who came to attend this dialogue physically. Over the last 2 days and today, the first day, then we peaked at around 140 plus participants. Yesterday, we peaked at around 160 participants virtually. And today, the last time I checked, we're at around 130. And those people will stay through from morning till afternoon. This is an indication that we are talking about issues that matters, and people feel that they've got a contribution to make for this theme that we've been talking about. We also then had 10 exhibition stands there. People were fully engaged. Jamie, when you were talking about the value of the wine industry, you failed to mention that they even fed us wine. So for that, we really thank them. The useful of FANAPAN in terms of convening, it was displayed here. So Jamie asked, what next in terms of the next convening? The platform is available for everyone to use. I will repeat this. FANAPAN platform is available for everyone to use, from national, continental, or global stage. We are there for convening. And when you talk about our comparative advantage, convening comes as number one comparative advantage. So in terms of attending to the 3 workshop objectives, I think we delivered well. I will not repeat, Dr. Matabane already then eloquently spoke about how we delivered on those 3 objectives. But the most important one for me is that we have aimed to make sure that people here are networking. And I believe that they have networked, and then there will be opportunities for people to collaborate. The other thing which I think we need to take seriously here is that we want to move from rhetoric to action. So we really need to have, in terms of delivering on objective 2 about recommendations, that those recommendations are bold and are transformative. We need to see through that we deliver on the request by the minister that let's leverage the STC platform to make sure that our recommendations are filtering through to influence decisions at the AUC level. So the team which we've been documenting this, I believe that they're going to have those bold transformative actions that we'll be able to communicate with the minister. I realize that we've overshot up then our time by 30 minutes. So colleagues, from the board chair, he apologized that he could not be here today. He traveled to Free State, but he sends his utmost appreciation. And as a CEO and head of mission of FANAPAN, let me thank you all, not mentioning names, because I might miss one and then I'll be taken to task in terms of, you didn't thank me, but I contributed XYZ. So all of you, thank you so much for being part of this. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Chilidzi Madzivandilat. We've come to the end of our dialogue, and I don't know whether we have any housekeeping instructions for everyone. If you can show me where the food is, I think I'll be happy. Otherwise, thank you very much to everyone. You made my work fairly easy, and I appreciate everyone's comments and remarks. And of course, the CEO has already made the vote of thanks, so I don't want to reopen that. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, everyone. Just before we go, the next session is the field visit, which I will invite Michael, if he's around, to brief us on the field visit. Also, for the record and video, we would ask Her Excellency for a short interview, and they will be free to guide you on that as well. Michael from ARC.
Thanks. Good afternoon, everyone. I'll be really quick. I'm Michael van der Laan from the ARC and also affiliated with the University of Pretoria. I've helped organize the field visit. I hope it's going to be a really good one. So basically how it's going to work is we're going to have 5 groups. Each group is assigned a color. You should have picked up a little field visit package outside with a color. That's the group you're in. There's yellow, green, blue, orange, and purple. So we've got 5 stations. We've chosen them carefully. We hope they really speak to the topic of climate smart agriculture and the things that can really make a difference on the ground. Around this very campus, we have indigenous and medicinal plants. So that'll be the first group starting here, the yellow group. So if you have a headache or you didn't get enough food at lunch, most of these plants can be eaten. I think it should be quite interesting, I hope. We have if you go out the main gate and you turn left, your first right goes down a road that becomes a sand road. It's about 75 meters. And that's where most of the other sites are. So the one other site will be a mobile clinic. It's not for blood pressure and COVID. It's actually a plant and soil mobile clinic on wheels that we would like to show you. The other one is a weather station. So it's the weather stations that have taught us so much that we know about climate change, but the money to fund weather stations is getting less, and the challenges to keep them running are getting more. So we'd love to have a discussion, get your ideas about weather stations. We have a field trial, a maize and a wheat field trial just around the corner. It was started in 1939, so that's the beginning of World War II. We've been doing the exact same thing since then. We have different treatments of fertilizer, no fertilizer. We'd love to show you that, to talk to you about that. And then we also have a drone demo. That's the last one, also down there. So we have a live drone that's going to go up and down, but I think also more importantly, a sprayer drone. The opportunity for artificial intelligence to go and detect disease problems in a field and spray just those spots. I think the potential is amazing. We'd like to show you some of this equipment if you haven't seen it, and to get your ideas. So we have a bit of a, yes, there's Prof. Sue at the back. We have flags with the different colors. So immediately after lunch, 2 o'clock, we're going to meet just outside here, and then you can link up with your group. In South Africa, we have a South Africanism now. So sometimes you say, well, when are we leaving? And a South African will say now, and it means anything from 2 minutes to half an hour to 2 hours. But we needed to please go at 2. Okay, so we've got a good 20 minutes for lunch, and then we really hope you enjoy the field visit, get to enjoy the area and the weather. Thank you very much.